I thought we had more than enough titles for our friend Abdul Hakim Shabazz, and this week I learned there was a new one thanks to a lawsuit that was filed. A website calling itself Satire, conservative satire in southern Indiana, called him a, quote, liberterain in name only. We'll explore what a liberterain is with Abdul, as well as Republican Jim Merritt, Democrat Brian Gaddie this week. Okay, let's get the lawsuit out of the way first. If you're just joining us, if you did not know, Rob Kendall, fellow employee of Abdul's over at WIBC Radio, got sued, or he is suing for defamation, I believe, this group in southern Indiana who referred to Rob Kendall as a pedophile or a pedo, or maybe both. I don't know. Their defense, Abdul, is their satire. They can say whatever they want. That seems like media ethics was my favorite college class. That seems like a weak defense, and I'm not a lawyer like yourself.
Well, you should have went to law school because it is a very weak defense. Matter of fact, it's not even a weak defense. It's not a defense at all. Because what folks understand is that satire, and while I'm a firm believer in the First Amendment, you have the right to say what you want. The First Amendment only protects you from the government, doesn't protect you from private citizens. And the First Amendment has never covered defamatory statements. And when they called Rob a pedophile on their website, wrote them a letter like saying, hey, you guys need to sort of backtrack this. They doubled down on it, like, okay, fine. And so that would be in court. Of course, it'll be up for a judge to decide the ultimate disposition of this case, but you can't go around calling people pedophiles. That's called defamation per se, which is accusing someone of a crime. And satire is kind of like pornography in a sense. You may not be able to describe it, but you know it when you see it. And that what they wrote was not satire, it was defamatory, and that's why we're seeking damages.
I just love that they're making their legal arguments in Facebook posts too, and with lots of generous number of misspellings, such as liberterain in name.
But yeah, and that's the thing that really surprised me, because if you're sued, you go get a lawyer and shut up and stop talking. That's kind of that's law school 101. That's like law school 098, the refresher course. So
Abdul, this is beyond the pale. I'm floored by this news, and I'm glad you're right there because you understand this part of the law. And Robert should be very upset and defend himself. And this cannot stand. And I'm glad you're right at the epicenter of it.
Thank you, my friend. Like I said, it's part of like I said, I'm a big believer in public discourse. That's why I do programs like this. Brian and I, we can exchange, sometimes not so pleasant comments with each other, but no one ever crosses that line. And so you can have a heated discussion, you have a thorough discussion, which I'm all for, but you can't call people pedophiles. That's just ridiculous.
All right, well, let's get into that discourse now, that gentle discourse in which there will be some disagreement, starting with the Secretary of State's race here in Indiana, which is the most anticipated, I would say, Secretary of State's race that I can remember since I've been in this state, and I've been here 11 years now. It's one of those that doesn't usually get this kind of attention. But Jim, it is getting attention this year, in part because of the Republican candidate, Diego Morales, and how Democrats think they have a shot at winning a statewide race for the first time in a very long time. Now, Diego and the Republican Party have been pushing back on some things. I know that Democrats, and Brian, I'll get to you in a second, Democrats have been pushing this thing about an automobile purchase that he made, that it was questionable. And but most notably, I think, getting attention is Diego walking back some of his previous comments about the 2020 election, about election security in general, and in particular, his proposal to shrink the window for early voting that now all of a sudden he is not in favor of. He's in favor of leaving it as it is. Do those position shifts, Jim, jeopardize Diego's candidacy in any way and open some doors for Democratic attacks?
Well, we knew that Diego in the Secretary of State's race was going to be that was going to be the race this year, and it's trying to get away from what is going on in Washington. This is a midterm election. Diego has been crisscrossing the state for probably 2 years now, running for the Secretary of State's job, and a lot of what we're talking about is inside baseball, and people in Kokomo and Seymour and places like that really don't know what's actually going on in these little issues. And I like a candidate who's listening. Diego's been working around the state, understanding what is going on in each county with county clerks, and he's wide open about his views. Now, remember, everybody that's watching this program, this clip, the General Assembly creates the law for our elections in the state of Indiana. The Secretary of State is the officer in charge, but I think he is a dogged candidate. He is working hard. He's talking to a lot of people. He's well funded, and I think he's going to win.
There's also the fact that, I mean, he did change positions, and he has lots of candidates, Brian, alter their positions, maybe moderate somewhat between there's not a primary for Secretary of State, but the convention in which Diego was nominated and the general election. But there is also, on the record, he did appear as a guest on the podcast of one Steve Bannon, noted attempted insurrectionist and very close aide to Donald Trump. And there is, the narrative that Democrats are pushing right now, and they've created their own website dedicated to Diego Morales, is trying to, it would seem, expose a potential split in the Republican Party because that candidacy or his nomination at the GOP convention this summer was quite contentious.
Absolutely. And if flip-flopping was an Olympic sport, Diego would have a gold medal, be a gold medalist, because he has changed his position so much on election issues. He's now for upholding the current laws that we have. Before, he was wanting to roll back those laws, I'm sure at the beck and call of the Trumpists, because let's face it, he is an election denier. He is a proponent of the big lie. Let's be blunt about it. I mean, this is someone who was still pushing and propagating the lie that Donald Trump had the 2020 election stolen from him. So that is Diego Morales. We also know that he spent over $43,000 of campaign dollars to buy a car. I think it's a Toyota RAV4, I believe. He couldn't even have bought an American car. I guess he didn't want to help the UAW, I guess. All I can say is I hope, did he get it in the luxury package or the sports package? I mean, he literally.
A lot of Toyotas are built in the Midwest.
I know, but
we have a lot of vendors that are Indiana companies, and
yes,
there's a lot of people working for Toyota in the state of Indiana, Brian.
Absolutely, there are a lot of people in the state of Indiana that work for Toyota, but at the same time, being a Democrat, I'm going to be for the United Auto Workers, and I don't make any bones or about that. I am pro UAW. I'm pro union. To the constant consternation of my good friend Abdul, he's been trying to talk me out of being pro union. I've known Abdul over 10 years, and he's like, this guy is so pro union. My dad was a union man. My dad belonged to the National Electric Carriers Union, so my union ties run deep. But the point is, Diego also was fired by Todd Rokita and Charlie White. So the very job he's trying to get, he was fired from twice.
Here we go.
So Jim, how do you explain that? I mean, just imagine trying to get elected to the very agency that you were fired from twice. I'd like for you to respond to that. Try to spin that one, my friend, like a washing machine. I'd be ready to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think Diego Morales has run a very good campaign. I think he's been an outstanding Secretary of State, and we look forward. And I truly believe he's going to win and be a very
losing in the polls.
Officer. Huh?
He is losing in the polls.
Well, I'm not sure how much.
Destiny Wells is an excellent candidate. She's a veteran. She's an attorney, and she has a very, very good record throughout her entire professional career.
It's a good race, Brian.
So it's definitely a good race. And the Indiana Democratic Party, we have rebuilt. We're much stronger now. We've been, and I would say definitely over 10 years. There's no doubt about it. The Indiana Democratic Party is back, and we're going to make Indiana a much more competitive state, and we are making Indiana a much more competitive state.
Very quickly,
Diego Morales. I'm trying to think of his nickname. Should it be Sleazy D or Diego Must Go?
While you think about that, Abdul wanted to chime in, and I had a question for Abdul as well. But go ahead, Abdul.
A couple things about Diego's campaign. What the issue is, it's not so much the going back and forth on how many days for early voting, 28 to 14, then back to 28 again. It's not so much the being fired from the office and quitting before he was fired the second time. It's not so much the $43,000 car. And now the latest controversy is his military record, and did he serve the full time in the National Guard or did he not? Any one of these things by themselves, I'll freely agree with my good friend Jim Merritt, it's basically inside baseball. It really is. When you put them all together in the aggregate, the being fired from the job, the $43,000 car, the question about his military service record, all those things add up after a while. And it's not so much Democrats. The Democrats aren't going to vote for him. Hardcore Republicans will. It's those middle of the road folks. They're the ones who are like, hey, what's the next shoe to drop? Are we done here? And you have this constant, steady stream of controversy after controversy after controvery. And this even hasn't even set foot in the office yet. That's where I think Diego is going to have an issue or two. And like we said, my poll system polling the Secretary of State's race back in July was almost basically a toss-up, which is not good for Diego. We're going to poll again around the end of the month, and then we'll have a much better picture of what this race actually looks like. But once again, my friend, is that constant drip of like it's like Bill Clinton, another controversy, another controversy, another controversy. When does it stop?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was going to ask, sorry, Jim, didn't mean to cut you off. I was going to ask you, Abdul, I'm glad you brought up the military service record, because I saw that in an email from Kyle Hupfer, chair of the state Republican Party, who, let's be clear here, I don't think was of favoring Diego Morales back at the state GOP convention, but he's the nominee now. At the same time, he mentioned that defending his military record, his service in the National Guard. That's the first I'd heard of that criticism. I hadn't had nobody brought that up to me. I hadn't seen anything about it. Maybe I don't pay attention to the right places. I had a Democratic Party insider tell me, no, we haven't brought up his military record. We don't care about that. We're talking about these other issues. So who was criticizing his military record?
Basically, right now was a story by our colleague James Briggs in the Indianapolis Star.
Where
James Briggs had requested a copy of his military service record. Destiny Wells has been very smart in that and not touched that issue at all. But there's a question about how long did he serve? Did he put all his time in that he needed to? If he didn't, what happened? Why didn't he put in all his time? Like I said, once again, my friend, it's just this constant drip of controversy after controversy. We're only about 50 days out and change, only 20 days away from early voting. And one thing Diego hasn't done yet is really appeal to those moderate independent voters that everybody needs in Indiana to win. And if you don't believe me, just talk to Senator Richard Murdoch and former Superintendent Tony Bennett, who lost the Democrats statewide. Now, do the wins still favor Republicans in this midterm election? I think so, yes. But that Secretary of State's race, that could be the on election night, that could be the top race in the state.
It really, Ray, it really is up to the Diego Morales campaign to tell the story. Most people don't know that Diego actually was in our military before he became a citizen, and he has a great story to tell. And I've heard it a lot of times out on the political road, if you will. And the next 50 days, Abdul is exactly right. The Republican Party, the Diego Morales campaign, with their large war chest, is going to have to tell the story of Diego Morales, and he will have to continue. And when you talk about the car, you have to have an automobile that can get you around the hundreds of thousands of miles.
Why didn't he buy it himself? Why didn't he buy it with his own money? Come on.
Well, it's a campaign car, Brian. I don't know if you've been a part of a campaign before.
Oh, I've been part of plenty of Democratic campaigns, but that was a bad decision for him to use campaign donations to buy a campaign car. Come on, Jim.
That'll be up to the voter, but I would think that you need to get around somehow. And
you can. Hey, that's why they have enterprise rent a car. You could have rented a car.
So I'm sure his supporters. I think his supporters would much rather have him drive and own a car rather than borrow a car from a big.
Well, then he should have used his own money, not campaign donations. Hey, if I could interject here, Destiny Wells also has a great story. She served in the U.S. Army, my father's service as well. I'm the proud son of a U.S. Army drill sergeant father. She served for 20 years in the U.S. Army. She's an attorney. She has an excellent professional background, and no one's questioned her integrity like they have with Diego Morales. So you're going to need every dollar of that war chest. You're going to need it, because in the end, you're going to lose this race.
All right. Let's talk about an issue that could affect, in a roundabout way, the Secretary of State's race, even though that has nothing to do technically with abortion rights. But abortion rights are an issue that Democrats are trying to use to drive voter turnout, which will be key in that Secretary of State's race. So yesterday, of course, this week, the new abortion restrictions took effect here in Indiana. There is a hearing on one of the lawsuits scheduled for next week. A hearing in the second lawsuit has not yet been scheduled, but the law has indeed taken effect. Democrats talked about this on that day. There was a vigil outside the governor's mansion from opponents of the abortion law. And Brian, this is something that Democrats nationwide have been talking up because the polling seems to be in their favor. However, there is also polling out there that the overturning of Roe has been very popular amongst a majority, at least, of Republican voters. I don't know if it's as much of a majority in favor of it as Democrats are opposed to it, but this is something that is blanketing the political conversation across the country. Question is, how loudly will you continue to talk about that in a red state like Indiana, where you might be in the majority, you might not, depending on when the poll is taken?
Well, Indiana is a red state. As a Democrat, I am wearing my blue Democrat shirt. I would acknowledge that. But Indiana is not ruby red. I don't think Indiana is Mississippi. We're not Alabama. So we are a state where the Indiana Democratic Party, under the great leadership of Chairman Mike Schmoll, we are much stronger than we've been in definitely the last decade, or I would say even longer than that. So Indiana is a state where we can be competitive, from Gary to Evansville. Now, to your point about the abortion issue, I've already said that I believe a lot of suburban women are going to take a strong second look at the Indiana Democratic Party and our candidates, because of the fact that a lot of suburban women do not like the government telling them what to do with their bodies. This is, again, this is so, to me, hypocritical from Republicans who claim to be the small government party, who claim to be the party who doesn't want government in people's lives, but yet you want the government to tell women what to do with their bodies. It's just, to me, it's just hypocritical. So not just here in Indiana, but all throughout the United States, suburban areas, Democrats, we're going to be more competitive in these suburban areas. And I think we're going to surprise a lot of people in winning suburban Republican women to vote for the Democrats, vote for us Democrats, no doubt about it. I call it the Dobbs effect.
Well, we will see. Jim, I know that depending on the campaign and where that campaign is taking place, I know our friend, our former insider, Senator Kyle Walker, is running a lot of ads in his district because that was thought to be a competitive Senate district. He took a notably more moderate position on abortion rights during the special session than a lot of other Republicans took. And at the same time, whether it's especially nationwide, Republicans are not talking openly, with the exception of Senator Lindsey Graham, apparently, are not talking openly about abortion as much as, not nearly as much as they have in the past. It was almost an annual rite of passage to have some abortion legislation in a regular legislative session until this year, pre-Dobbs decision, and then, of course, the special session after the Dobbs decision. I guess the question is, it's all about turnout. It's all about who shows up at the polls. Are Republicans going to be energized by the Dobbs decision, or is it going to perhaps work against them?
This is the question really of the fall, and how the Republicans can deliver the message that the Biden administration in their first midterm has failed for the last 2 years. That is really the crux of the issue. Is if the Republicans, if we can get our base out, if we can get the folks that were at the convention and grow from that base that nominated Diego Morales with many new people to the process because he brought them in as delegates. It all depends on how we get our base out. And Senator Walker has done an outstanding job of leadership in this regard. It's tantamount to communicating a message that Republicans and like-minded libertarians and independents can rally on. And I'm so hopeful that the message that we have 50 days going forward can be about the economy stupid, as James Carville famously said many years ago, and talk about the last 2 years of the Biden administration and how we do things differently in Indiana, and the Republican Party can lead and has led in this state. And so there's no doubt about it that the abortion law nobody liked. and I don't know if that's a prescription for a good law or not, but what happened during special session happened, and away we go. And it's who gets their message out, who gets their base out, who gets the independent out, and that's who's going to come out on top. With Senator Todd Young is going to win 68% of the vote, and Diego's going to win. But that comes after a great message in the next 50 days.
And we still, as you said, we've got 50 days to go, and that seems close, Abdul, but there's still a lot can happen in the next 50 days in regards to the candidates, in regards to just how big of an issue abortion becomes, because it seems like it's going to be talked about more at the national level than perhaps here in Indiana. At least that's the feeling I'm getting right now.
Well, it's interesting because I'm working on a story for this weekend on voter registration here in the state of Indiana. And I looked at voter registration from the primary to just a couple of days ago. And also, I compared that, and I sort of sequestered that off from when the Dobbs decision came out until that same time. And what I found out was about 45%, almost half the new voter registrations in the state of Indiana since the primary came after the Dobbs decision. Now the question is, are those Democrats? Are those more women, more men? That we just don't know yet, because we don't break down the data that way. But the fact that almost half of the new voter registrations since the primary came after Dobbs should be a warning sign to some of my Republican friends, particularly those in the suburban areas, that women are mad and upset about this particular issue, particularly younger women and younger folks. You got to remember, young women have only known a world of Roe versus Wade, because Roe versus Wade is the same age as me, almost 50 years old and some change. So people like my niece, she's only known to have her reproductive choices. Now that's been taken away from her, and now who wasn't politically active before is politically active now. So, but once again, though, like Jim said, gas and groceries, the economy is a big issue as well. So the question is going to be, my friends, who comes out more? Is it the gas and groceries folks, or is it the abortion folks?
Is also going to be the folks that understand that President Biden has created more jobs than any first-term president in the history of the United States. Jim, that's a fact. I like to say sometimes my Republican friends are allergic to facts, but that is a fact. President Biden has created more jobs than any first-term president in the history of the United States. Gas prices are coming down. I mean, gas prices were over $4 a gallon about a month ago. Now they're like in the mid three. I mean, still too high, but they're definitely coming down. Inflation's still coming down. Well, the fact is, President Biden is doing a great job with the economy, and look who he had to take over from: the twice impeached, disgraced former President Donald Trump, who did such a horrible job on COVID. It crashed our economy.
Yeah,
the thing is, we don't want people to have amnesia here, and I'm here to remind people what happened.
Yeah, but let me just throw one thing about gas prices, because I think sometimes we forget this. Gas prices are basically a result of supply and demand in a nutshell. Gas prices were ridiculously low a couple of years ago because nobody was going anywhere, because we had COVID. Folks were working at home, working remotely, et cetera, et cetera. Once the restrictions were lifted, everybody's back on the road. People have been in the house, they want to get out. So naturally, gas prices go back up. Now gas prices starting to moderate again. So to blame a president for high or low gas prices is, to me, it's a bit disingenuous. Yes, there's some policy things the president can do, like drilling and environmental rules, but fundamentally, gas prices are a result of supply and demand. It's just that simple.
Well, if it were that simple, then no political candidates would be talking about it, though. So
right.
That's not
that comment, Abdul, should be for Jim. He's blaming President Biden for high gas prices.
Okay.
So that economic lesson should be for our friend Jim.
Hey, very quickly before we run out of time here, I did want to mention this a political milestone that we reached, and actually it's one that's kind of coming to an end, or will next year, and that is Jim Brainard, longtime mayor of Carmel, not running for re-election in 2023. He's in his 7th term as mayor. It's just, you talk about eras. I've never known an era where Jim Brainard wasn't the mayor of Carmel from the time I've been in Indiana, and that's true for a lot of people. Carmel has quadrupled in population, I believe I read, since he first took office back in January 1st, 1996. They'll be leaving in 2023 or end of 2023. At the same time, Jim, he leaves a kind of a mixed legacy among some Republicans. There were a lot of people who did not like the amount of money that has been spent to develop the downtown Carmel area as we know it now. But what will Jim Brainard's legacy ultimately, do you think, will be?
Well, I live here now. I live in Carmel, and I feel very safe. And I also haven't hit a pothole since I've gotten here, and I've been here a couple of years now. And so he's built a city, and the city council has as well. And he's broadened the tax base. It's a beautiful place. There are arts. Jim Brainard's done a lot of great things as somebody that has hit each each age group. For instance, the Monon Trail. I walk that with my dog, and I see senior citizens, and I see parents with strollers. I mean, he has reached all different types of people. It's a growing place, and I find it's a happy place, and I'm thrilled to live here, and I think he's had a great term of office of 27 years, going to be 28, and it'll be an interesting change, whoever takes over from here, and I'm pleased that he's moving away, because I think change is good, and but I think everybody in Carmel, at least a large majority, when you look at his wins, thank Mayor Brainard for really he's just a brilliant. He just brought so many different things in an innovative style to the city of Carmel, and many people are enjoying that today.
Mayor Brainard also, let's be honest, a different type of Republican than some of the newer members of the Republican Party, at least those that have come in, say, the last 5-6 years, I would say, Brian.
He's probably a never Trumper, but he won't tell you.
Well, he might be, but he very much an environmentalist.
Trump. Let's talk about cannabis, Abdul.
I promise we'll do a cannabis segment at some point, just for you two to commiserate there. But Brian, Democrats have made some gains in Hamilton County the last few years. Widespread gains, maybe not exactly, but they're showing up now. Is the mayor's race in Carmel, is that a little too big a hill to climb right now, do you think? Or is it time for Democrats to be competitive once Mayor Brainard's term up, and probably depending upon who the Republican nominee for mayor might be?
I think we Democrats have a chance in Hamilton County because of the demographic changes, and also because of this abortion law we've been talking about. There's no doubt about it. Suburban women are not happy about the abortion issue. I know you think, well, what does that have to do with the mayor's race? Well, it's just the fact that the overall political climate in Hamilton County is not right wing. I consider it more moderate type Republicans. And moderate Republicans are gettable voters for us Democrats, because the Indiana Democratic Party, we are a center left party. I mean, we're not out there in far left la la land like our Indiana Republican friends would like to paint that false picture of us. But we are a center left party, which means we can get moderate Republican voters. We can get independent voters. And a lot of those moderates and indie voters will definitely be open to us voting for the Democrats. So my point here, Ray, is that Hamilton County is changing. It is a more winnable county for us Democrats. And if we put up the right type of candidate that can get Republican votes, we can be very competitive in Hamilton County. And who knows, we may even be able to elect a Democratic mayor of Carmel. So yes, I do think Hamilton County is definitely much more competitive for us Democrats, no doubt about it.
I don't know, Abdul, has that kind of shift been made yet? I mean, yes, the feel of Republicans in Hamilton County, very much different than Republicans in, I mean, pick your county, the couple counties away from Marion County. But I mean, it does seem like it's the end of an era. And again, depending upon who is the Republican nominee in 2023, I mean, that could determine a whole lot of things, whether this is a close race or not.
Exactly. The one thing I want to say, I will give Jim Brainard credit for all the criticism he's gotten. I tell people, voters in Carmel had the opportunity 6 times to get rid of Jim Brainard, and they kept it each time. So that ought to tell you something, because usually 2 terms as a mayor is all you get. Then it's time to get out of Dodge and go do something else. There are a couple Democrats who are thinking about running for mayor of Carmel, 4 Republicans. So I think Carmel is still a Republican city, albeit a more moderate, more traditional Republican city than sort of the ideological things you see in other places. But at the end of the day, there's really not a Republican or a Democratic way to run a city. Either you know what you're doing or you don't. You either fix the potholes, put the bad guys behind bars, pick up the trash, have good schools. And it's just basically governing 101. There's some things you can tinker around the edges a bit. But I remind people, for people who say that Carmel spent all this and all this and all this, the voters of Carmel spoke 6 times, and Jim Brainard won each one of those times.
I would say Carmel and Hamilton County is moderate Republican. It's not MAGA Republican, and that's a big difference.
It's roundabout something. Well, we can definitely say that. I mean, if Jim Brainard did nothing else, he gave everybody roundabouts, I think, or at least made them popular enough to where you see them a little bit of everywhere, including in Hancock County, where I live. They're all over the place now. Our political insiders, always a pleasure. Jim Merritt, Abdul Hakim Shabazz, Brian Gaddie. Appreciate your time. Y'all have a good week.
Thanks, sir.
Thank you, Ray.